Andrew Forrest is the founder of Fortescue Metals Group, the world's fourth largest iron ore miner. He joins me in Hong Kong here where he's speaking at a forum to discuss ways to end human trafficking. Andrew, you're a mining tycoon. What have you got to do with human trafficking?
About 5 years ago, my daughter spent quite a bit of time in orphanages in Nepal, and we did intelligence on these orphanages, and we had to break the news to Gracie that the orphanages where she worked were unfortunately part of a human trafficking modern slavery network which trafficked Nepalese girls into India, then up into the Middle East. So that was deeply shocking for all our family, and particularly Gracie. And from there I went and did a complete audit over my own supply chains, and I found slavery deep within Fortescue's own supply chains, and I then realised this was a supplier who supplied many of the top 500 companies in the world as well as Fortescue, and then I knew that slavery was everywhere, you just had to look for it.
You've recently been in the news more for FT readers' benefit for the ups and downs of Fortescue. Australia's enjoyed quite a big mining boom, a mining infrastructure boom over the past decade on the back of China's demand for raw materials. Now with China's economic slowdown taking effect, how is that impacting not only Fortescue but Australia as a whole?
The fall in the iron ore price was unexpected from the perspective that it went against the normal demand and supply economic rules. When you've got a falling supply, you would expect that prices would stay reasonably strong, but even though the stockpiles in China fell over the last 9 months, the iron ore price, instead of staying strong, collapsed, and that's when we actually raised the alarm in Australia and said, well, it's not collapsing because of the laws of supply and demand, it's collapsing because of statements by multinational companies deliberately saying they were going to oversupply the market. Now, fortunately, those statements have stopped and the iron ore price has recovered.
Do you think the iron ore price recovery can be sustained?
If big companies don't play with the iron ore price through making very aggressive forward-looking statements which are designed to depress prices or elevate prices, if we can just go back to the free markets and not distorted markets, I think you'll see an iron ore price which will oscillate around current prices.
But earlier this year, didn't you suggest that Australia's big iron ore producers should roll back their production?
If iron ore companies run their corporate strategy through the capacity of their machines, i.e. they step back and say, we'll just produce whatever we can, well, you're going to get a result which is a machine-led strategy as opposed to a thought-out strategy.
After about a decade of negotiations, China and Australia have finally agreed on a free trade agreement. They've just signed it, which will remove tariffs. What does this mean for Australia's businesses?
There's been a number of unnecessary trade barriers between the two countries. They're not all down, but many of them are down, and the understanding between Australia and China from a community perspective to a fiscal perspective to an investment perspective is really terribly important.
Australia has long held close links with the US military, has US military bases on Australia. Are those links jeopardising trade with China?
I'm going to let the politicians sort that one out. I have a personal view that we need to have best friends across the region. We don't need to have a best friend, that Australia can forge its own foreign policy based on its own interests and certainly not choose favourites.
There was talk earlier on this year that Fortescue was going to potentially sell a stake or sell off some of its infrastructure in able to keep the company
That's a very
afloat.
unwise choice. I mean, a company which is making over $100 million net a month isn't really struggling to stay.
But that has now been reversed. All those options are off the table now.
No, look, all through the Australian iron ore sector, you've got minority joint venture investors. The one company which has kept all its cards, kept all its gunpowder dry, is Fortescue.
And how has the recent debt refinancing helped you? It was a fairly chunky coupon of roughly 10% or so. But
yeah, 9 3/4.
There you go.
It was a chunky coupon. There's a time when the equity markets were concerned about the nearness of our debt, because there's debt coming up next year. So we just picked the whole lot up and pushed it out 4 years.
It's given you a bit of breathing time.
It's allowed us certainly to bring our operating costs down from mid to last to bottom decile in the world. So no matter what happens with the iron ore price, Fortescue will stay strong.
Andrew, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.